Now don't go back to sleep, because we are all in the nuclear hot seat.
Honey, look at those beautiful clouds.
Those aren't clouds, Daddy. Those are chemtrails.
Chemtrails? What are chemtrails?
Chemical trails, Daddy, and they're very bad.
Hi, this is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineering Watch Radio for the week of March 7th, 2014. The fun never stops in the planet of insania. It's hard to know where to start. Yet again, the circus continues in Ukraine, events that are all connected. We have yet another round of engineered snowstorms for the east. It just seems like we're playing the same show week after week after week after week. But it still goes on. I think it's very near an end. In the next probably week to 10 days, we'll see a change of direction for the climate engineers. And they have now announced that we have a scheduled El Nino for the coming fall. And El Nino tried to start last winter, not 2013, 2014, but 2012, 2013. And it didn't develop as it was expected to, and it's certainly hard to know why that event didn't come about when it was basically already starting to unfold. And it's possible that the constant 24/7 blanket spraying of the Pacific, perhaps even with ice nucleating elements and jet stream manipulation, which changes wind currents, which then changes ocean currents, it's really impossible to know the full degree of climate forcing that they have achieved. We certainly see the catastrophic effects of what they're doing, but that El Nino mysteriously fizzled at the last moment as it was already starting to unfold. So now the predictions for fall 2014 show a very different pattern than what we've had for 2013, 2014. So we'll see if the schedule of weather comes about as predicted, but certainly behind the scenes there's likely to be a lot of pushback going on from various levels of various governments, California in particular. I know absolutely that there are levels of awareness of this issue very high in the ladder. I know that firsthand. So is there pushback going on? Now it seems that the weather pattern that's being scheduled for us is to pull moisture in from the Pacific instead of diverting it all the way up through Alaska as they've done for winter 2013, 2014. So for the fall 2014, the pattern is shaping up very differently. So conditions are changing everywhere on the ground very, very rapidly, and in other geopolitical arenas around the globe, again, the situation in Ukraine it's absolutely astounding. And I don't know how many people might have seen the statement by John Kerry I quote, I think verbatim here, he said, no country has the right to interfere with the sovereign affairs of another country. And I can barely watch that man make that statement when the U.S. has boots on the ground in 156 countries around the globe. The epitome of hypocrisy for John Kerry to make such a statement it's absolutely mind-numbing. So we see the situation in Ukraine unfolding. Now, midweek, there was a defector from RT-TV. RT is Russia Today, and there was one of their newscasters that miraculously defected from RT and showed up at CNN studios an hour later talking about the total propaganda from RT, which, from all available data on the ground, it seems RT is the most accurate portrayal of news out there. And they made it the headline feature story on CNN. This is Wednesday night. So you would think they would follow up on this story, but perhaps Putin played some cards behind the scenes, because by the next night, not only were they not covering that story anymore, they had no news on at the 10 o'clock p.m. hour Pacific time, nothing, just some sort of other distraction show that wasn't even part of their normal news programming. So certainly we know Putin has a lot of cards to play as well. Certainly Putin knows that 9/11 was a false flag event. I don't think there's any question about that. Certainly Putin knows that the U.S. is massively climate engineering the planet. Russia probably is too. All data indicates they absolutely are. But there's a lot of cards Putin could play to push back against the sort of idiocracy that the West is engaging in right now, toppling country after country. And I'm not saying that Russia has a very benevolent past either, not at all. So my wife is actually from Lithuania. I met her there, and she knows firsthand what it's like to be under Soviet occupation. So I'm not taking away from that, but I'm saying, what's it like right here, right now, today? Who's the biggest problem right here, right now, today? And we see the Western powers. We see a lot of problems with Israel, and that's just fact, simple fact. I'm not faulting any particular ethnic group in any sense, but simply the governments that run those groups. And in our case, with our government, it's astounding the things that are going on, while the American people seem to be unable to respond with any sense of outrage, which is truly perplexing to me. And even those, this is even more perplexing, and this appears to be really cognitive dissonance. Even many groups who claim to know that they're spraying, who recognize it, and even tie it to eugenics, somehow in certain ways hold their government, or at least their country, which involves their government, on some sort of pedestal, and that's really opposing views. I mean, how can you believe it, or recognize that your government is spraying you like a test animal and literally tearing the biosphere apart and poisoning you, your children, and then somehow hold this American exceptionalist view? I don't really understand that. And I'm an American. I certainly don't want or claim to be anything else, but I don't want to stand for many things that this country has done. I don't, I haven't, and I won't. So I hope, what I want to talk about during this segment is the degree of cognitive dissonance in all arenas, and the degree to which people latch on to a certain perspective, which gives them a certain lens that they see the world through, and they can't seem to break that lens. They come to certain conclusions, and they can't seem to take in new data and adjust their compass heading. And that's a problem. That's a huge problem. It's why things are so upside down in so many arenas, and even with our arena, with climate engineering. It's astounding how many people recognize or claim to recognize that these programs are going on, that they're disrupting all the weather, but then they can't seem to take in outside data about what the current facts are on the ground, and how the climate engineering has affected those, and how the media is warping and twisting data, just like they do with Ukraine, just like they did with Iraq, just like they did with 9/11. That it's imperative that people find ways to break down their filters and start over. So we have, of course, today with us Russ Tanner, and Russ has been a huge help to the cause, to the common good all the way around. Happy to say Russ is a huge help with GeoEngineeringWatch.org right now also. And I want to get Russ's opinion. And we have Richard with us too, Richard Sachs, who's a constant source of input and insight on various issues. So, Russ, let's start with you. The cognitive dissonance of so many people towards so many things, from, for example, the events happening in Ukraine right now, to the people that seem to recognize climate engineering but don't seem to recognize or at least admit to its effect on virtually every bit of weather we see right now. What's your thoughts on that?
You know, this is really the human dilemma, and it always has been. People, unfortunately, so many people are by nature focused on themselves. And if everything is comfortable, if everything is manageable in their lives, then they focus on themselves, and they don't really want to bother thinking in terms of the greater good and making a sacrifice. And this is really, you know, in my mind, this is really what this all comes down to, is that the people have the power to change this, to turn this all around, to get rid of most of the diseases that we have today. I mean, we know most of the problems that we have been cured in the past, whether they're health problems or economic problems or world problems. We know how to handle these problems. We have the experience, we have the knowledge, we have the technology to solve all of these problems, but they're not implemented because there are people who profit from these problems. This is Machiavellianism. They profit from these problems, and the public, who has the power and always has had the power, is not willing to make a sacrifice for the common good. We're too self-centered, too self-focused. We have to look at the big picture. And we have to realize, and I think Richard Sachs said this last week, is that we have to realize that doing something for the big picture, doing something for everyone, is an act to help ourselves as well.
It is. Ultimately, to act for the common good is to act for one's own good as well. Richard, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Dane, as usual, your comments are fantastic, and you brought up enough in the first few minutes to discuss for the next several days nonstop. So I'll try to just pick a few little points related to what you're talking about now. The first point, I think we need to be really conscious of our language. I've said in the past how important it is to get away, recognize the euphemisms in what we talk about and drop them and talk about exactly what we mean. An example of that is that our country, America, or any other country, and to me, all the countries are good, because the countries have nothing to do with the crazy people in charge of them, which are a tiny minority. The country are all the people, regular people that are living in them. The governments are generally small groups controlling huge masses of population through very clever strategies. And they, in my opinion, absolutely do not represent the real country. And America is a great example of that. Most of the people in this country are not like the people in charge. And so, you know, I've talked with people in the past who have been in the positive anarchy movement, thinking that if we just get rid of the evil governments, everything will be fine. And they're missing a key point, which is the governments in themselves are not inherently evil, as the anarchists say. The governments have become evil because they provide a preset power structure for all the bad people to get together conveniently in and control everybody else under a mantle of supposed authority and justification. But they make the governments evil because that's where all the worst people congregate at the highest levels. So as far as your cognitive dissonance point, psychologically people have a desire to make everything fit in their own minds and not experience cognitive dissonance. They really subconsciously work against that. And one way that they do it is to find a label that they like, a group called something or other. They want to be called a Republican or a Democrat or a liberal or a conservative or whatever the group is. And as soon as they identify with a group, they cut their ability to be clear in their perception by that degree. And they can't afford to see things that go against whatever group that is, their official policy. So, you know, if the only way that people will finally get clear is to be brave enough inside themselves to say, look, my priority is to see what's true and what's really happening. And if nobody else agrees with me, fine. My first priority still has to be honest with myself.
But how much do you really see that? Because I'm frankly, I understand your points, and I don't disagree with that's what people should do. But I don't see that. When I see people in the Middle East, for example, who very benevolently talk about the U.S. and that they don't hold the U.S. population responsible for what's happened, and they're very kind in that way, because I personally know more people than I could name who did everything they could to help the atrocities of recent years happen by not just by complacency, but trying to ridicule or marginalize any attempt to be even presented with the truth, presented with facts. They simply didn't want this. They wanted to be a part of the herd, if you will, and that's where they perceive it's safe. And I just this week was given a video that's very revealing about people's propensity to stick with the herd no matter what. This is we're going to post this, I think. It's an experiment that was done with 30 people in a hotel conference room. 29 of these 30 were in on this experiment. One was not. So they set it up where they pumped actually smoke into the room, set the smoke alarms off. It was some sort of seminar thing, and only one person in that room didn't realize this was all just a test. So the other 29 people didn't respond at all when the smoke alarms went off, fire coming into the room, and the one person got up for only a moment, but then saw that nobody else was reacting. So even with risk to their own life, they sat down and pretended nothing was happening. It was astounding. They did this experiment over and over with different people, and the response was the same. And this is truly shocking behavior, that people are so prone to sticking with the herd mentality that they will literally sit in a room that appears to be burning down as opposed to standing out from the herd mentality. Astounding.
Yeah. Dane, without losing that track, I want to throw in one other element, and that's that a similar experiment or a complementary experiment was also done, I think, at Stanford. And they brought people in and told them that under the direction of these highly credentialed experts, they were testing a new, I don't know if it was an interrogation system or what, but if the person didn't give the right answer, then the person they brought in for this test was supposed to give them an electric shock. And almost everybody that came in for whatever they were paying them, a few dollars, would just go ahead and shock the person up to the point of actually killing them because they were told that by a recognized authority. And you probably remember hearing about the same thing.
I've seen it. Yeah,
so I just wanted to agree with you and lend that additional support.
Yeah, no, I've seen that too, and that's also truly astounding. That early, I'm not sure if it's also the same one you did, but they actually were willing to continue administering shocks as long as they were told to. And human behavior is needs to change. It just simply needs to change, and people need to open their eyes.
You know, I think that our chances in a short time of convincing all these herd mentality people through intellectual discussion to adopt those traits of internal courage and independence are highly unlikely. I think that what we've got realistically, strategically, is a situation where there are a relatively small number of people that are reachable if we do a good job. And we're going to have a strategy that works with them, because the vast majority, we don't have time to through normal means to reach them all.
And you know what's interesting? What both you guys brought up is you keep bringing up the word courage. And this is what foundational. The founding fathers of this country, I know they weren't perfect, but they did expose some principles that were very important in saying that if you are not diligent and courageous, you will not have freedom. In other words, if you don't have courage, you will not maintain your freedom. It's not going to happen. And mainstream media has put a stigma on those who are willing to expose government corruption by calling them paranoid conspiracy theorists. They try to attach a word to it that has stigma to it. So that makes the herd move away from those people because it has this paranoid stigma, where actually what's ironic is exactly the opposite is true, is the people who are not willing to stand up and face this corruption, this truth, this hard truth, those are the ones who are fearful. The people who are willing to stand up and listen to hard truths are the ones who truly have the courage.
Yes, those are the cowards, those who tend to go with the lynch mob and just this herd mentality. And that's why when I referenced earlier, when people from other countries that are being oppressed by our country very benevolently and really wrongfully don't put any blame on the American population, I think that's wrong. At this point, the American population absolutely needs to bear a huge percentage of the blame because they simply have not responded with any sense of outrage, any sense of responsibility toward the things that are happening right now. And this bit in Crimea, again, I know enough about the Russian history. I know how many of Russia's own people were killed by their government in decades past. In the case of Stalin, perhaps as much as 30 million were killed by their own government, many military officials and so forth. Again, my wife has been exposed to this. She was behind the Iron Curtain as well. But that was then, and this is now. And I'm not saying their government is benevolent now in a sense, but if we look at, for example, the amount of countries, again, the U.S. is occupying right now, for lack of any better term, the hypocrisy in this country is beyond comprehension. And the people even today that don't want to know what's happening, they don't care, they don't want to know, they don't want to hear about it. It's astounding. And I would argue this, again, I believe events are unfolding right now at such speed that those in denial will not have the option much longer. The chickens are indeed home to roost. In the coming weeks and months, I believe it's quite likely that our collective realities will start to go into fast forward for turning on their heads, that we are in a complete paradigm shift right now. And it's certainly, in some senses, I look at it as a step in the right direction, in that if a society has to collapse in its current form, period, it will collapse. I mean, short of some unforeseen force of intervention, it will collapse soon. And from where I'm standing, that's a step forward, because if it continues in its current form, there'll be nothing left, absolutely nothing. And I've had friends, 30-year friends, that made it known to me in their comment how twisted they thought I was because I wanted things to collapse as they are now. But I questioned them with this response: who's twisted? Me for wanting the current insanity to stop while there's still something left to save, or them for wanting the party to continue, if even only for a few more months, leaving nothing left for their kids, just so that they could avoid harsh realities a little bit longer and thus steal any chance of a future from their children? Who's twisted? And so, again, we're all faced with harsh realities, but I hope right now that people abandon their filters, clear their lenses so they can see a wider angle from what's happening, from things in Europe right now, and also things to do with the spring. Again, I was very, very shocked and astounded this morning. Russ, Richard, both of you, I sent you a video from a quote-unquote independent news site from someone I thought had a more, well, I know he has a more honorable or more intelligent view of the world, I should say. And I was shocked to see what appeared to be just a portrayal of a story simply to raise attention for his site or something. I don't know what it was. But to me, it's a selling of honor. It's an absolute selling of honor from someone who knows better, that relates to our climate engineering issue that we're all involved with fighting. And it was a discussion of climate issues with virtually no recognition of these programs. And that's the sort of thing that it plugs into everything else we've just discussed, this sort of military occupation around the globe. And then as soon as someone tries to take a stand, like Putin, against the continued toppling of countries on their border, suddenly he's the demon, he's the occupier, he's the one who's trying to spread empire. It's the complete 1984 paradigm that we're living in right now. And I hope people, again, find a way. I hope something helps them find a way, whatever force is out there that wakes people up at times. I hope that happens, because we need people to wake up, stand back, take in new information, abandon preconceptions, and reset their compass heading. Period. It needs to happen. Go ahead, Russ.
Dane, I was going to say, along the lines of solutions, I've learned one thing in terms of trying to motivate the populace. There's one thing more powerful than law, and this may surprise a lot of people, but it's really more effective, and it's called social pressure. And this is exactly what I mentioned before, how mainstream media talks about associating the word paranoid with people who uncover government corruption. That's social pressure. It puts the general populace in a position where they don't want to be associated with those kinds of people. What I would like to see us do is put pressure on the general public and say, you know what, it is shameful and it is cowardice not to be involved. If you're not seeking the truth from alternative media, then you are afraid, and it's a shameful thing to do. And try to apply that social pressure in the way that it really should be applied, not the backwards way that mainstream media. I'm just bringing that up because I think that, you know, the mob, the general populace, they are guided by what they believe is the perception of the rest of the mob. And I think Richard would probably have something really interesting to say about that. But it's all about perception. It's so funny how it all works. Richard, does that make sense? I mean, what do you?
Richard,
I really agree.
First, I want to say, Russ, I mean, I completely agree with what you said, and the tack you just brought up. I think you're right on target, Russ. So thank you for sharing that, and I certainly second what you stated. Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a great comment too, a great observation, and it explains a lot of what you see government putting into place. For example, the Common Core curricula in education. This is a way to manipulate the perception of an entire nation of people, starting from when they're, 5 years old or something like that, if they can't get them at 3. And many dictators who have been absolutely ruthless have said how important it is to start your brainwashing with the children, because by the time, before they even grow up, they're going to do whatever you want them to do. And this is what I've been looking at the new, our federal government's Common Core curricula recently, which they did through private companies so they couldn't be held responsible directly, and say it's coming from experts, which is a key word we've all been trained to respect. And it's teaching a philosophy that's completely against this clarity that you guys are saying everybody should get. They know how important that clarity is too. And it's a key element in all the federal programs to make sure that nobody can develop it.
Well, yeah, this is along the lines of all the discussion we've had. There's a post on my Facebook page today from a meteorologist named Gregorio who fits exactly the profile that Russ mentioned. It's in an article with Psychoanalysis, in fact, that mentions those who toe the official narrative as hostile and aggressive, and this guy fits that mold. They're very aggressively saying anybody who believes they're spraying the skies needs help.
He's right. We do need some help right now. We're actually asking for it.
We do, but he's the epitome of the sort of character that we're describing here. While people like him are the ones, as Russ correctly mentioned, that are truly afraid, that they shiver in their own socks probably with any notion of facing reality, but they won't have a choice much longer. This is once the car is off the edge of the cliff, and it is. There's no going back. We can't go back and say, well, we had the power to make a turn and not go off the cliff. But in many senses, we have already gone over the edge, period. There's no going back. The reality we've known, the planet we've known, is changing by the day, and there's simply no going back. If people, many years ago, those who knew, for example, the climate engineering was going on, if they would have stood up and made their voice heard, we wouldn't have gone this far. And with other things, nuclear power, and the decimation of the planet in many ways, shapes, and forms, from clear cutting to there's where would you start? The poisoning of the oceans. I mean, the oceans are nothing but a giant toilet bowl for industrial civilization. I mean, we now know, as of last week, they're dumping the fracking fluids off the coast of California. How wonderful! It's no wonder the marine animals are washing up dead. Between Fukushima, between the fallout from the spraying, between dumped fracking chemicals and cruise ships that dump their trash, and the absolute mindless arrogance of the human race. I mean, I scarcely have the words, and I would ask people, along the lines of what Russ just mentioned, and literally at this point shaming people for the positions they are taking or not taking is appropriate. It's time. Because when we take our last breath, each of us, where will we be found? Cowering in a corner, trying to protect our own personal pursuit of pleasure? Or will we be found standing and making our voice heard for the common good? Which is it? Which is it? And if we can affect this equation at this late hour, and the hour is indeed late, then we must make that decision now. And I saw there's a time frame on a film that is the most dear to my my heart of anything I've ever seen. It's called Earth and the American Dream. And I mailed out hundreds of these tapes in the late 90s to everybody I'd ever known or met. I wrote a handwritten letter with every single one. It's the most moving portrayal of the price the planet has paid for the quote-unquote American dream, and it really exemplifies all of modern civilization. But you can't watch this and not be moved unless you're immovable. And I mailed this tape, handwritten letters to 400-plus people, every one of which I'd known and worked with or had association with. Heard back from 3 out of 400. And I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked at how people could be so unmoved by that. But they're simply in denial. They don't want to face this. But I would argue again, there's no hiding from this any longer. We are all about to face challenges that we can scarcely imagine. So what will we be found doing? Standing at our post or cowering in the corner? And the choice belongs to each and every one of us. Russ, can you give the phone number in case anybody wants to call in?
Yeah, I'd like to invite anybody who wants to call in to call the number, which is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Please call in and ask your questions. Now is the time.
Thanks, Russ. And at this point, all of us need to, again, figure out what our philosophy is, try to clear our lenses, take in new data, have a correct compass heading. You know, I know this from when I do a lot of trekking out in the trailless wilderness as well, and it's completely canopied and extremely steep topography, and you can't really tell where you're going unless you know the terrain very well, or if you go into new areas, which I do sometimes. You have to constantly keep reassessing the topo map and look at contours from underneath the canopy, and you just have to constantly take your direction, or you go off course. It's just, and life is no different. It's the same way. When I did a lot of navigating on the ocean for a number of years, and I used to challenge myself to see if I could keep a compass heading without looking, or keep a straight direction without looking at my compass heading. And you almost can't do it. I mean, if it's foggy, for example, you just have to keep looking down, or you're veering off course. And I relate that to life. I relate those little experiences to life, that you have to constantly reassess your conclusions, your perspectives, what information you're relying on. Is it sound? We all have to constantly keep doing this. So, again, I hope that everybody reevaluates and considers what they're doing in their life right now. How important is it? Is fighting, for example, climate engineering a once-a-week pastime when you're in the mood? Or is it something you do whether you're in the mood or not? And it needs to be the latter. We need people to, as much as they can. I understand people have lives and they have certain tasks they have to take care of, but I know a lot of people in my life, part of what they're taking care of are cruise trips and golf games and so forth. And we're simply, right now, the challenges we face are banging the door down right now. So if people are going to stand and make their voice heard, it's now.
And you know, it's never been easier to spread the word. You can go online and print flyers from geoengineeringwatch.org. You can print those out on your own printer, give them out. You can have DVDs burned. If you want to contact either one of us, I know somebody who will burn them for free for you. You just need to buy the DVDs for 29 or 39 cents a piece, and you can burn What in the World Are They Spraying or some other video that's related and pass them out. So it's so inexpensive, and never have we had more power to contact people than today. So people...
I'll mention, too, I know Russ is thankfully working on fixing our problem with downloading the flyers, because I know a lot of people have tried and had trouble, and we had an issue with that. We're trying to fix that now, so that should be remedied fairly quickly. And we also will have the flyers back up for sale on the site, a 150 thick color glossy flyers, priority mailed with shipping included for $25. It's about what it costs to print, package, and ship. So we'll have them for sale there, and people can download them free too. We're just trying to get them out there. If there's universities or something so forth, we can work things out and get them out even cheaper or for no charge at all, just depending on the circumstances when what we can do, funds permitting. So anyway, it's just these tools matter. These tools are very helpful to introduce people so that they're not unarmed. And I hear from a lot of people that are distraught at the lack of response they're getting from their family members and friends. And most of these people have not actually armed themselves with credible data. They're simply trying to verbally communicate what they're not quite that familiar with yet. And that's makes it difficult, to say the least. So I encourage people to arm yourself with some credible data, like Russ suggested. With the DVDs are important, flyers are good. So we'll try to make the link functional soon, so our flyers can be downloaded, and we'll try to make them available on the site again to anybody who needs them. So.
And even passing out the credible data, you've got test data on there too, which will be up shortly, showing elevated aluminum. Almost all these tests, we did tests in Maine. We have 6 times the amount of aluminum in our rainwater than is allowed in drinking water by the EPA. People need to know this. And this is an effective tool for waking people up as well, I think.
I want to make a comment on the testing we've seen now with 3 labs. And we've seen the same thing with radiation fallout. What the labs are doing now is this. They raise their minimum reporting level to a point that's so high, much of the contamination is not shown. I've seen this on 2 tests now recently, that they don't even show any contamination, for example, for aluminum, unless it's over 200 parts per billion. That's quite astounding, actually. The lab I use shows down to 1 part per billion. It's not like they can't do it. They show down to 1 part per billion with an aluminum test. That's $21. It's not like it's expensive. So these labs have simply upped the bar to a point where they can hide a lot of the contamination. I just looked at a full panel test for some 20 items from New York that there was so much lead and mercury that it was above even these new higher minimum levels. And that's astounding. We're still looking into that. Lead is actually an ice nucleating element, and it's shown up in several tests now, and we think they might be using lead again. They don't care about the environment, so we need to get that through our heads. But the bottom line is the last 3 lab tests I've seen have minimum reporting levels that are so high, they don't show anything below this. And it's simply, again, exactly what we saw after Fukushima. When the radiation was everywhere, what did they do? They raised the safe level 10,000%. It's astounding what happens in our society today, and nobody reacts. Nobody seems to do anything. So, again, we're not going to have that option for long. And I think to actually, with people around us who refuse to look at data, refuse to pull their head out of the sand, they deserve to be shamed at this point. And not, you just walk on after that. You can't continue to beat your head against a wall that is going nowhere. But we can certainly leave them with a statement of disappointment in their abysmal behavior toward the common good. And I think we should.
Dane, I think another thing that's available with virtually no cost at all to people anywhere in the country and in many other places too is, you could visit your local government and start irritating them with constant questions about when they're going to pass some kind of resolution or starting to make at least their whole town or city aware of certain problems instead of making believe that they don't exist.
I agree. And it's, as we go into the coming weeks and months, again, I think certain factors are going to start unfolding to such a degree that it will become ever more apparent to people that our reality is changing rapidly. In regard to the climate, right now, based on all available data, again, we seem to be heading for an El Nino that they either cannot suppress or that they are going to allow to happen to generate more moisture. Now, when they're engineering weather, they need moisture in the atmosphere. It's what they use for chemically nucleating. Slovenia, by the way, if anybody wants to see a truly cataclysmic ice storm, Slovenia had an ice storm that was up to 6 inches thick. This has never been seen before. It absolutely devastated the whole country. Slovenia is not capable of defending themselves. So it appeared they were just they bore the brunt of a particularly extreme geoengineering experiment. The photos are astounding. People should Google this. I'll probably post something on it as well. So if they indeed are going to let El Nino spin up a tremendous flow of moisture off the Pacific, it's for continued nucleation, but to pump that moisture in, and they can manipulate it, nucleate it, as we see they clearly have done. But that will raise temperatures further yet. And I think the degree to which the climate has been damaged by many factors, and including especially climate engineering itself, will be ever more apparent. The price of food is going to start going up very rapidly, and the nonlinear nature of our common equation is going to start becoming much more apparent. And many people tend to look backward. In fact, we're trained to do this and you see quote-unquote degreed economists and environmentalists and so forth. They'll look at whether they're looking at the environment, the economy, anything. They look backward at a graph and somehow think that that gives it a life going forward. That's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. To think in those terms is ridiculous. Just because you came along a certain path doesn't mean that path continues in the same direction going forward. It's complete insanity to think in those terms, and most people do. So what people need to realize is our entire equation is extremely non-linear, that the party is over for all practical purposes, and now we're going to truly see the corner that we've painted ourselves into. So again, it's past time to take a stand, and I hope everybody listening really sorts out priorities and decides what is. I hope climate engineering is. I think rationally it is. This is not my theme or my subject, and not Russ or Richard. I don't think you guys are in this just because it feels like some hobby you wanted to do. It has nothing to do with that for me or either one of you, I think. It's just simply if you look at all the equations or all the factors and all the ramifications from this issue, it simply warrants being a priority issue. So I hope people make it such and spend every minute they can engage in this battle.
Yeah, I want to make one more point, Dane, that I've made before, and that is that, yes, people will probably be, unavoidably aware of exactly what's happening to the climate. If they're not already, it'll happen pretty soon. But that's not going to solve our problem at all, because as soon as everybody's aware of it to a certain point, the television's going to tell them how to interpret that and who to blame and what they need to do and what freedoms they need to give up in order to fix it. And they're going to keep the attention completely away from the culpability of the spraying. So, our main focus here is not only to get people willing to admit what's happening in the climate or all the other things that the spraying does besides climate, because there's a lot. It's to associate those bad effects with the airplanes flying over their head and dumping things on their head. And when they do that, then we have a chance of some progress with the issue.
I think all aspects are important. We have, certainly the health issue is paramount, and that's why I argue that the climate engineering issue is even more important than Fukushima, because if we're not thinking cognitively, we're not going to be able to face the Fukushima challenge or the next Fukushima. And so I don't argue that point, but I would argue again that no matter what other technologies exist, no matter what, I talk to people who are more focused right now on this certain types of growing vegetables, these hugelkultur, or I might be saying that wrong, different methods which will have viability if we have a planet that sustains life. But we, in fact, are on the fast track for a planet that will sustain no life. So it's still a part and parcel to this and must be addressed. And the film I mentioned this morning, I sent to both of you, Russ and Richard, it's quite astounding. The conclusions that were stated in that film as fact, when not a single fact was presented. And the only thing that really stood out for me, the best they could do, I guess, is what I should say, is to present an animated film of a sad mastodon stuck in some ice. I don't know. I don't have the words. That's a fact. So when I try to post things, I post link after link after link after link with facts that are not disputed by anybody. And I hope people look at those links. I'm trying to present data in a way that indicates it's not my conclusion, it's not my opinion, it's not what feels good, it's what is. It's data from the ground. So I hope, again, not just in my case or with this issue, but whether we're talking about Ukraine or what Russia's doing or anything else, I hope people look at data from the ground, look at all the pieces to the puzzle, not one or two, and not a headline. Headlines aren't facts. Otherwise, we could believe Kerry when he says no country has the right to interfere in the sovereign affairs of another country, while the U.S. has 100 boots on the ground in 156 countries around the globe and is toppling country after country right now. We live in a total sea of hypocrisy. It's beyond belief. So it's up to everybody to examine the data for which their conclusions are based, period. Because otherwise, our opinions are no more than various forms of religion that each of us subscribe to as being the only right one without ever examining the bigger picture. And that simply is not going to get us anywhere but the rest of the way off the edge of the cliff.
You know, Dane, we have a Facebook group that has 17,000 plus people in it, and I just want to encourage people that if you only have 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week to do something, send out a few emails to a friend, to hand out a few flyers, can imagine what if 10% of those people were doing that every day. You know, we talked about the law of the law of multiplication before, where you have a tremendous effect. If everybody just does a little bit, and then those people do a little bit, you know, like I said earlier, the people really have the power in this, and the powers that be are afraid of the people waking up, which is why they control the information infrastructure. That's the first thing you want to do when you want to take over a society or civilization, is you control the information. And that's exactly what they've done. Yeah. So they're scared to death that people will wake up. So the power that everybody has, if you're listening to this, please spend 5-10 minutes a day and encourage everybody else to do the same. The cumulative effect is huge. Absolutely.
What if those 17,000 people all showed up at their city council meetings, wherever they are, and started talking about what's actually going on?
That's right. In response, also, you talked about the price of not doing anything earlier, Dane. The price of not doing anything, we're all going to suffer. So it's like either get involved or you're absolutely going to suffer. You know how many people I know who have upper respiratory diseases, strokes, aneurysms, which can be caused by small particle aluminum. This is in the medical literature. It can clog up your capillaries and cause strokes and aneurysms. I talked a couple of weeks ago about a friend of mine who had people in one office under heavy spraying, had 3 people at the same time had strokes. Same office, 3 ambulances had to be called. It was absolutely astonishing. The number of people that I know have had heart attacks, illnesses. They wake up every 2 hours at night. This really strikes a big chord with a lot of people. I hear this all the time. I wake up every 2 hours at night. Well, guess what? If you knew how the plumes descend on us, if you drew a waveform of how the intensity goes up and down as these plumes drift by, you know, for those of us who can smell and taste them, it's astonishing. So everybody's affected. And if nothing else, then everybody knows that the smaller the particle and the more numerous the particle you breathe, the shorter your lifespan. So all of our lifespans have already been shortened. So
yeah, I agree, Russ. And again, it's not that these particles can cause everything you just outlined. They are causing it right now. And we're all being marched to the gas chamber, so to speak. Do we march silently and cooperatively, or do you stop, turn around, and take a stand? And this is that time right now for all of us to take a stand. And on the effect of people working on the equation, again, the math I use to try to point out how effective people can be. I know a lot of you have heard it before, but it's important to consider. Again, if one person effectively told 2 at the beginning of a 30-day month, and I challenge people to do this on their computer or on their calculator, because it's hard to believe this equation is true unless you do it. But one person affects 2 the beginning day of a 30-day month. Those 2 affect 2 each the second day, and so on for 30 days. You end up at 5.5 million at the end of 30 days. It seems my math is wrong, but it's not. And that's the exponential nature of such equations. Now, again, the same is true with the negative aspect of what we face. I mean, as I mentioned, a nonlinear equation in the direction we're headed. It's imperative we alter that course immediately. And although we're faced with certain challenges now that cannot be undone, can't be undone, even when a mistake is realized, even when a society or a civilization realizes the total folly of the direction it has taken, you pass certain tipping points, and we're far past certain tipping points. There's no going back. But that being said, does one give up and do nothing, or does one accept the reality that now is and make the best of it? And again, knowing that using one's time for the proper end is all that truly belongs to us. I would argue this point. Many people are worried about protecting this possession or that investment. Everything can be taken from any of us, everything. The only thing that can't be taken is our honor and the correct use of that honor. That's all that any of us own. And it's time we use it correctly, period. Every day, every minute of every day. Every day counts at this point. Every day counts. So it's up to all of us to exercise our will in the correct manner, period. Richard?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, it's another great observation, and I think that we can never count on any kind of guaranteed result in anything we do. We just have to know what our motives are. And again, you can't even really tell what your own motives are if you're mostly unconscious. And like Russ had mentioned before, in order to become more conscious, which is the basis for any kind of improvement in any area of life, requires courage. Because what if you see something in yourself that you don't like or you don't accept? If you can relax in a courageous way and just say, all right, how can I make this better? Then you don't have to fall apart as a reaction. You can just take an open attitude that I want to know what's true. I don't care what it is I find out, but that way I can at least know where I am and know what to do next. So I would love to see that attitude taught in school, and instead of that, kids are taught to take every guidance from authority figures and never trust what they themselves feel. And that's a hard thing to fight against, but that's part of our opposition that we're looking at.
It can be fought, though, and I had a school administrator at my children's school. It's a charter school that between classes, I don't even know who this administrator was. They walked up to me in the hall and said, I want to tell you, your kids really think out of the box. It was the greatest compliment I could have had from her.
Okay.
And I hope that I encourage them to do that, and I hope that more and more of this starts to permeate into all children. And what a crime, what an incredible crime by any society to try to make their young, to blind their young with this sort of indoctrination. What an incredible crime. And I can't imagine those that engage in this and those that help perpetuate it and carry it on. But again, the walls are coming down. They're coming down now. There'll be no hiding our common dilemma for much longer. So the seeds we sow right now, all of us working together, the seeds of awareness we sow will sprout. They'll find fertile ground soon because the events on the ground will make it so. That all the denial in the world won't hide what's coming. It's coming very quickly. So again, time is imperative it's imperative we use our time as wisely as possible every single day, each and every one of us, to sow the seeds of awareness. And again, back to having a reason for our opinions, a sound, solid, researched, verified reason, not a feeling or not because we don't like somebody. I bring up Al Gore a lot. I hear this all the time. I don't like Al Gore. I don't like him at all. The guy's he's the epitome of hypocrisy. But you can't imagine how many people have a certain opinion, and we all know what it is, because they don't like Al Gore. And that's not a reason for an opinion. So all of us need to examine our opinions about everything. And same with Russia. How many people have been indoctrinated in this country especially, to hate Russia? For how many years have we been trained that way? And that's simply not a reason for an opinion to decide what's going on over there right now, because what's going on over there right now is wrong. It's wrong, and our country is the one fomenting it. Literally, Russ, Richard, did you guys hear that there was a tape phone? I heard the conversation myself. Tape phone conversation between one of the UN officials and I think it was the French president or one of the presidents of the EU countries, admitting on the record, they didn't know this conversation was taped, that it was the opposition, the radical opposition snipers that were shooting police from the rooftops, police and protesters, to create the turmoil. Did either of you guys, it's verified fact now. The ballistics, they verified this fact. Did any of you hear this on mainstream media, that it was actually not Ukraine doing this, or certainly not Russia? It was the opposition protesters shooting people from the rooftops?
Yeah, I saw that, and I heard it on alternative news. I saw it on InfoWars. But it's clear that the U.S. has arranged, hired, paid for, and organized all the people necessary to create the violence in the Ukraine, just like they have in so many other countries in the Middle East. And it's just, they figure it's working pretty well, and they'll just keep doing it in country after country and blaming whatever group they need to blame in order to make a regime change. And I think that's what we need to be prepared for happening here in this country, is that when certain things are happening and false flags that are expected here when they want to set off various kinds of devices in cities or whatever they have in mind, and they know exactly what groups they're going to blame it on all over television. And we need to, be ready for this to happen and see through it.
We do, and that's my point, that we have to constantly take in new information. What are the facts on the ground now? What are our biases? How can we get rid of those biases and reassess the situation? And we will all need to constantly do that because everything is in a state of flux. So, again, I think the coming weeks and months are going to get very interesting. We'll see how the road twists and turns, but people should keep their cupboards full.
Also, I want to make a comment on what you were saying about education, Dane, and how unfortunate it is that this is being done to the children. The parents do have a certain amount of responsibility, although they're under a lot of economic stress. But the ones that can do it need to get their kids out of government indoctrination camps as soon as possible. Immediately would be fine. And the ones that can't need to show up at their local schools and, object to the kind of ruining of the kids that's being systematically engaged in and not just accept it.
On that note, I went to a quote-unquote Christmas program by this charter school I mentioned. And at the end of that program, they started playing this nationalistic song showing American flags draped over literally tank barrels, gun barrels. It was this nationalistic alma mater song, basically democracy at the barrel of a gun. I was so absolutely astounded and shocked that I went straight to the school administrators. Only 3 other parents did, which shocked me. But we were able to get that particular music, quote-unquote music instructor fired for doing that. So you can do some good, and that was so inappropriate it was like a Hitler Youth sort of propaganda presentation at a church, at a Christmas presentation. It was insane. It was absolutely ridiculous. But you have to get
parents in communities used to be responsible for what education happened there, and even if the schools are doing this sort of thing, they can do exactly what you just demonstrated and take it back.
They can, but it takes parents getting up off their chair and not just taking the easy road and doing nothing. So anyway, it's we're in a battle to the intersection of what's coming. But it's imperative, again, we all use every day as effectively as possible to move the ball forward, not to distract ourselves with other things, but to actually move the ball forward. So, Russ, I don't know. I know we didn't get quite the Skype set up today for my end, but we'll do it next week. Yes, and hopefully I'll have a little clear audio on after. But my thanks to everyone who listens, everyone who's trying, everyone who's joined the cause and trying to affect it. And again, let's all continue to polish our ability to affect this equation every day to try to more effectively raise the warning flag on everything that's happening around us.
Not only that, but today we have so many tools available on the geoengineeringwatch.org website. You have flyers available. They can be printed out. DVDs can be printed out. We have yard signs, bumper stickers. Bumper stickers are great. You put them on your car, you put them somewhere, and people see them all the time. You don't have to do any other work except the initial work. They're very inexpensive. They last for years and years. So I would encourage people to contact either Dane or myself if you need to be put in touch with somebody who can burn DVDs, or if you need technical help, if you want a newsletter, if you want a blog, we'll help you with these things. Contact myself, and we'll put you in contact with people who can give you the resources and the technical expertise you need to get the message out. A lot of power with the internet today to do this for one person.
There is. So if people, the more they work at this, the better they'll become with their skills at how to go about waking other people up and arming yourself with some effective data to pass on. That's a first step in this equation. So we'll all continue to work on that. And Richard, I know down your way, you've got some flyers down there now too, right?
Yeah, finally got some, so that was good. We're handing them out.
Okay. Russ?
Thank you for joining us on GeoEngineering Watch Radio this week. We're here every Saturday